Okay, welcome back to the 1090 podcast. We're here with Adam Schroeder. Thanks for coming. Can I ask why it's hard to get guys on the podcast? I'll just be honest with you. So thanks for being willing to talk about a terrible situation and being vulnerable. Can I ask, why are you comfortable talking about it? Why are you here?
Well, it's something I've had to grow into. You speak of the vulnerability as it can be a pretty hard thing for especially for men. I think it's much more natural for women to step into it than men. I would say over the 8 years since my son passed, there were many years where many years where I couldn't say or talk about it at all. And I didn't learn until later that not just being vulnerable to just anyone was important. It was actually being vulnerable to other men, which made a big difference for me. Right? There were a lot of situations that happened throughout the time period, and what I learned was I needed to be vulnerable to men and allow men to be vulnerable with me. There we kind of father each other through the process. That was the most important. It wasn't just being vulnerable to groups or women. It was specifically men that I learned where most of my healing has come from this process.
How long did it take you to start talking about it, do you think? Because I know for me, I couldn't talk about it at all. I was very much like you, just saying it out loud was just simply too much. I just couldn't even admit it and say it. So I was just curious how long it took you to kind of...
Probably about 4 years.
Yeah.
Part of my journey was working through the trauma portion of it. Every time I would want to think about my son or be, there with him, I was transferred back to the moment that it happened. My situation in this event was pretty unique, even to, at the time, my wife. We're not married any longer, but it was the amount of trauma that I had to work through, because I was the one that came home and found him at home after, the accident, and having to just work through the images, the emotions, the things that I missed, in that moment, the complete overwhelm from that event. I couldn't pull myself out of the trauma of the situation. And then, it was the hospital stay and then having to take him off life support and all that stuff. Right. So
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, we have stories come in, but never heard a story like this before, like the way he died. The shame and guilt, how's that?
Oh, it was a mess. I messed myself up pretty good.
Sorry, can we just talk about the day of what happened,
Sure.
and then we can dive into these questions? I'm sorry, but
no, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm so sorry this happened.
So the day started out pretty typical. we'd actually sat down with our son earlier that day and just had a conversation about school and grades and all of that. He a year before that had went through an event with friends and some bowling, not really bowling, but lost some friend groups and stuff like that. So we were pretty aware of where he was at. He had found a lot of new friends and had made steps from there. But Gage was a very tender, very conscious young man. I mean, the amount of his ability to connect with anyone around him, and that's adults, teachers, kids, children. Like he just had this ability to see people for who they were, and but with that comes a lot of emotional burden that he puts on himself, right? Yeah. So we were there with him, and I got home that afternoon from just work. Had missed a workout, a CrossFit workout, and wanted to go do CrossFit. He was doing homework at the computer, and it was just at the time my wife left, I'd taken the other kids to swim practice, so I just let him know, hey, I'm going to go get a workout in. I'll be back, half hour, and and then left. Just said, just do your homework. It'll be good. I'll see you when you get back. And anyways, so I get back home and just pull in, and he's not at the computer again. And I just kind of call out his name, and then went out to the backyard to check on our dog. And this is where kind of the moment comes in. The dog was kind of frantic, and I didn't really put it together. It had fallen in the pool, and I was just like, what are you doing? Like, why are you falling in the pool? Went back in the house, and was calling for my son, and went upstairs, and walked past our bedroom and actually saw him laying down like he was asleep, kind of on his side. And I didn't think anything of it. I just said, hey, Gage, you need to get up. And walked past, went into his room. His phone was just sitting on his bed. Picked up his phone, kind of looked at it. Anyways, then went back into the room, and he was breathing very heavy, and I didn't know what had happened, right? And so, I'm thinking, did you hear what happened? Like, I'm trying to wake him up, and he's not responding. And then I noticed a little bit of blood coming from his nose. It'll take me a second to get through this, but and even at that moment, I still had no idea. I was just like, oh my gosh, he got blood coming out of his nose. I went into the bathroom, got some toilet paper, was touching his, trying to clean up his nose, trying to wake him up again. And then I moved him, and I saw, the other part of the injury on his head, and it all came crashing. I had no idea. I was still looking around, and I happened to look back, and that's when I'd seen the gun had rolled back behind the door. And then I knew. So I, call 911. He's still breathing pretty heavy, fighting it pretty hard. Just trying to keep him all there. And, the ambulance gets there, firefighters, they take me out of the room. And then I'm just leaned up against the wall, like in complete shock. I had no idea where I was at for a while. And then you have to call, I have to call my wife, let her know. I mean, it was... it's a moment that probably the hardest couple days, that moment that I've had to live through in my life. The ambulance takes him to the hospital. My wife gets home with her kids. They're frantic. They don't really know what's going on. They know that there's been a bad accident. Anyways, she has to go to the hospital, but I have to stay behind, and because the police have to talk to me.
Yeah.
So just to try to figure out what was going on, and we're just kind of going through that, and a friend of mine came over, good friend, and I'm just a mess, right? Start hyperventilating. It's it's just overwhelming, because at this point I'm going through my head like, how did we get to this point? What did we miss? Because you're thinking, because of the type of injury that it was, that immediately everything's going through my head about, did he take his life? So get through the police portion of it. They ask a lot of questions, and and then they won't allow me to drive, so I have to ride in a police car to the hospital in El Paso, where it was. And I just, again, in the police car, was hyperventilating, and he's asking me to try to stay calm. And at that moment, as I was questioning everything, a very precise thought came into my mind, and it was an accident. It was just an accident. And that was probably the first tender mercy that I received. And I haven't looked back since that moment either, when I got that message of, it was an accident. You need to go to the hospital, focus on your family and your son. You can let that go. So since that moment, I haven't ever thought back. And the hardest part about it too is the death certificate says suicide on it. And we don't know where they got that from, but, I think it was because of how the injury came about. And but I don't reflect on that anymore. I know that it was an accident. I know that at this point in my life that it was part of what his journey was going to be, and our journey. So I accept that as part of the circumstances. And then in the hospital, I couldn't leave his side. When we decided to take him off life support after they evaluated him and just said he won't recover, I couldn't leave him again. And I thought that it was almost like, I look back on it and think, I wish I would have handled that differently, but rather than the guilt of not leaving him. Because that particular moment really haunted me for a long time, watching him take his last breath. Certainly wouldn't recommend it to anyone. It still haunts me from time to time. So those moments put me into such trauma that I shut off. I mean, I grew up in a family of 10 kids. There's 8 boys. Like, we were taught to take care of it ourselves. We were taught, you've got to figure it out yourself. We're in a big family. So I grew up believing that you have to learn how to manage yourself. And to that point in my life, I'd learned techniques to manage, and they weren't always healthy,
What
you
are
know?
what are some techniques?
Oh, just, mostly for me at the time because I was you know, a member of the church, the LDS church. It was, didn't get into alcohol or anything. It was just pornography, right? I managed myself for years with it.
I think that's one that isn't talked about enough too.
No,
I mean, we're all looking at porn, but we all like, whoa,
it's so easy for
yeah,
someone to hide it, right?
yeah.
You don't, there's not necessarily a physical, you know, physical presentation that you have that says, "Oh, you're on drugs or
Like, oh,
whatever."
he's an alcoholic. Like,
Correct.
look at him. Like, yeah, it's easier to keep it in the
But you
closet.
can get the same relief and dopamine hits and everything from it. So to that point in my life, and even through the death of our first child, our daughter, she at 39 weeks, she was stillborn. Like, I was able to be there to support my wife at the time. I just managed myself pretty well, and I could be there for her and continue, working through life. But when my son passed away, I broke. There wasn't anything that I could do to help me anymore at that point. And it just increased from there. It went from pornography to, I mean, it did, the levels of it just increased. And I couldn't, nothing that I did was bringing peace. And then I had to deal with the burden of, you got to show up. You need to show up for me. You need to show up for this family. And I couldn't even show up for myself. I pretended for a long time, stayed, as best that I could. But eventually all of those choices has led to, the end of my marriage. So it's chaotic. Even though I've found peace and healing, probably only over the last, probably since 2002, 22. Sorry. Did I really start working on it? And that's, at that time, I had already done so many things that it just was falling apart. So that's when I immediately started, I got involved in a men's group, and that men's group, that retreat that I went on, really showed me that, at that point, God told me, you will be healed through other men, and you will heal other men. And that is how you will survive this, no matter what it is. So since that time, I've made it, a part of what I do every day to continue with the men's group and continue to reach out to other men and allow for them to have a place to be vulnerable and to know that it can be safe for them, to show that, you're not making the best choices, but it's okay. You're still a good man. You're still a good father. You're still a good husband. You're still a good guy, right? Sure, you made a choice that didn't benefit you, but that's okay. It doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean you're broken. And it took me a long time to get past that, the shame that I was a broken person. Today, I don't believe that at all. I reject that 100%.
A broken person?
That I'm a broken person, no. I may make a choice that doesn't benefit me, but that's all that it is. Oh, that didn't benefit me. It's okay. I can look at it differently. I don't even like to say that I'm broken or that someone is broken. look at it more of we make choices and sometimes they benefit us and sometimes they don't.
Why are you so honest? You're very extreme. I mean, you're opening up about pornography. You're opening up about losing your child the way you did, which could come with a lot of judgment from people. um, why are you so honest?
Because I've spent a lifetime being dishonest before this, and it's brought me nothing but suffering, really, right? One of my favorite books is The Four Agreements.
Mm.
And in that, the first is, being impeccable in your word. So even though I'm not where I would want to be, I'm a lot closer to where I would love to be, which is being impeccable and having integrity. You live parts of your lives where, or at least I did, where I didn't have integrity, right? Pretended to be someone that I wasn't. I needed to live the pageantry and the show of what a member of the church was supposed to look like, right?
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of lying that I went through.
Part of it's exhausting to lie.
Oh.
It's exhausting, and so I think when you lose a child, like you don't have the energy to put on the facade anymore. I think is part of it too.
And that's just it.
Yeah.
I had it didn't matter what step I took to increase it, to try to do more, bring bigger hits or whatever you want to call it. None of it worked. And then the amount of chaos that I introduced into my life after those choices was just too much. It was too much, not only for me, but it was too much for those around me. So I hear when I hear what men go through, and I know I was a very silent sufferer, believing you have to stand and just take whatever comes your way and be stoic and be strong, and it just doesn't work that way, honestly. There are moments where you can be strong and stoic. But for the most part, I had to learn to actually be vulnerable with who I was and truthful with who I was. And being able to do that, I was able to find safety by being truthful to other men and being loved by them, regardless of that.
I want to touch on the way your son died real quick. I just have a thought. And I wasn't there. I don't know Gage. I don't know you. So I don't want to act like I know anything. But I do. I've learned a lot about suicide. And I just wanted to make it clear. I don't think that's what he did. But I just want to, even if that is what he did, I think the conversations I've had with parents in the past who have lost a kid to suicide doesn't mean they weren't good parents, doesn't mean they didn't show up, doesn't mean they didn't have full love for their child, and doesn't mean their child doesn't mean any of that stuff. Suicide ideation and that depression's a sickness and an illness, and it's a real thing. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how you're dealing with that thought still today. And I know what you said, like you had that moment and you've never looked back, but I just wanted to say that because I know a lot of people who have lost people to suicide and they loved you and you love them, and I think everyone knows that. But I know how guilt works, and when you lose a child, you just feel guilty. And I think when suicide is involved, the levels of guilt can go up, and it's just so unfair. But again, like guilt's weird like that. It doesn't have to make sense. So I just wanted to.
No, I appreciate you saying that because I don't want to diminish anybody else's experience around that.
I don't think you were, but I don't know. I just think it's really misunderstood and really messed up how people view that sometimes. So,
they do, and it's, one thing that was part of my journey helping, me and not only creating good, strong, vulnerable relationships with men, but, the therapy that I've had to do around internal family systems, right?
Hey,
Where you do not talk, where you really have no bad parts, right?
wait, we got to get into this now.
It's probably one of my favorite forms. It's probably been the most helpful form for me to do internal family systems work.
Can we talk about it?
Yeah.
Because this is what me and my therapist Matt did, and we started diving into these parts, and the pain didn't go away or didn't get any easier, but I started to understand myself. It started to make sense.
Right.
Like, oh, I have this emotion and this emotion at the same time. And it's not necessarily which one is it. It's, oh, they both need to be heard. Like, let's talk to both of them. And I think what I got from using it in therapy is it was good training on how to talk to myself day to day and talk to these different parts and let them be heard.
Be compassionate towards yourself.
Yeah. And I think learning the parts has made me a better podcast host because I just understand, like, you just need to be heard, dude. Like, they just want to say it. Like, you don't have to fix it, actually. You don't need to know what to say. You just need to let them be heard. And that's been a big part of my healing. But I want to hear your perspective a little more, yeah.
So for me, it was, understanding my parts, right? The good and the bad parts. And then the firefighters that get used to when things feel like they're getting out of control. And mine was whenever my parts felt like I was getting closer back to my true self, or fighting against, who I'd become, because my parts have made me who I am, or had made me who I am to protect me.
It's just so fun having a conversation with someone who, like, I just feel like I'm crazy when I talk about this with most people. They're like, what? You're naming these parts? Like,
right.
What?
It does sound at first when you get into it, but it makes total sense.
It makes
right?
total sense.
And then when you can actually do the work to get to the exile portion of yourselves, those portions that you exiled way early on in your childhood and actually go back to events that said that is when my part came into play, right? That moment. And it was reinforced a few other times after that. But that moment, right? And that was a big moment for me to go back and find where a lot of those parts came from, right? And to thank them for protecting me and keeping me from, possibly hurting myself, I guess.
Yeah, usually these parts happen in childhood. Is that where it was for you too? Or?
Yeah, one of the parts that so I had a lot of fear around public speaking.
Here you are now. I mean, I guess it's podcast, but still.
The funny thing is I listened to my mom talk about when I was much younger, and she talked about how I love to just talk. Like, I mean, you bring in church, I would get up and, in church and talk whenever. I would always volunteer to give talks, whatever. So I had no fear about it. So when I was in elementary school in Arizona, I decided to go out for one of the class. They were at our age. They were doing one of the class, student body, things. And I was like, oh, I'll go out for secretary. That'll be fun. And I did it all on my own. Created the posters and wrote my own speech and all that. But you had to get up in front of the school and do your talk, right? And so I'm sitting there watching the kid that I'm going up against, and he did an amazing job. Presentations, it was so smooth. He got a lot of help probably. But and I'm just like, I'm in a family of 10. Like, my parents didn't have time to sit down with me and do all that stuff. And I got up there and I froze and I just cried.
No.
In front of everybody. I mean, just cried. I couldn't do my speech. I couldn't say anything. And so in that moment, it created that fear because it was so embarrassing.
Moment, man.
People came up to me and said, "Oh, I voted for you because I felt so bad for you."
No, that's not what you want.
No. So in that moment, and ever since then, in groups, like a one-on-one conversation, I do really well.
Yeah.
Right? In small groups, 1-2 people, I do really good. But you get in a bigger group, if I'm going to ask a question or present my ideas or whatever, it's like this intense fear takes over. And that part is just there so I don't get embarrassed. So I don't say or do
Yeah, that
something
part's like, dude, we've
stupid.
been here before. Let's not do this again. That was
Correct.
bad.
So it took
man.
me a long time to step into that and recognize where that fear came from. And that fear trickled into a lot of things. It kept me from taking chances. It then turned into a criticizer, and where I'd criticize myself for being stupid or I got nothing of value to say anyways. So all these little parts, and all they were trying to do is just keep me from having an embarrassing moment.
They
again.
love you. These parts love
Correct.
you. They're trying to protect you.
which was fine. So once I let that go, I started taking chances again, getting up in big meetings with my company at these national meetings and asking a question of the executive on stage. And it was scary as hell. I didn't like it, but I knew I needed to do it,
Yeah.
right? So that I could progress that part of myself, and it's been really well. But I know for me, I told myself lots of stories, and that's how, as a young teenager, you get involved in pornography, and it just stays there because it's just trying to protect you.
Yeah. Like, let's numb. Let's not feel this. Let's distract ourselves.
So the tenderness that I had as a child, the natural love that I had for people, turned into a manipulation game for me. I was still a nice guy, but I was using it to manipulate people around me to say, I'm a nice guy, give me the things that I want so I can feel good about myself. Right? Go way above and beyond to be helpful or whatever. And so I lost myself as a man for many years. And getting back to your true self, which is the purpose of internal family systems, is to find that true self. I can actually name who I am. It's not I'm a father or, I'm a good worker. Like I'm a guide and I'm a teacher, right? I'm tender. I love, and I'm a great supporter of men and a cheerleader for whatever they need to go through. So it's very specific who I've been able to come to, and I don't need anything from anybody. I don't need somebody to tell me that, oh, you're great for supporting me or being here or listening to me or caring about me or sending me a text, right? Like I used to. I know that's who I am at my true self, and that's what I want to offer anybody, and especially to other men.
What are some parts of you that you kind of were maybe more influenced in your life, or parts that you found after Gage died? What were some things that you noticed about yourself?
I suffered from the nice guy syndrome, right? So being an overly top, very nice guy that just drop everything whenever asked, right? Whether that's for my kids or my wife or people or whatever. And that's because I needed the external validation from them. Whether it's thank you or, getting love or sex or whatever it was associated. Because those were, I said I had my needs. So I was unwilling to actually speak my needs. I felt like being overly nice, willing to support people would just know what my needs are.
Would you say you had that more than anger, maybe? Or was part of you just mad as well, like anger?
After Gage passed?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, discovering that's who I was and I wasn't getting my needs met. When Gage passed, we talk about the reason he passed, people will see it differently. The way I see it is the way that it is for me. But I went into this period of, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do with myself now? Like, who am I supposed to be? I had prided myself on being a father and a protector. And at that moment, you realize, I can't protect my kids. Really, I can't protect my kids. So I had an identity crisis at that point. And instead of showing anger, which would have been probably good for me to do, I suppressed that, right? To show up as who I always thought I should have to show up as, right? Steady, good guy, right? Don't be too emotional. Right. So I suppressed my anger pretty hard at first. Um, and I went through the grief of sadness and, went through the periods of hating God, like just for many, many years. Um, so yeah, I've gone through that of losing who I was all at once. And unfortunately, I suppressed so many emotions for so long that, it was hard for me to appropriately show the right emotions, whether it was anger or sadness or, uh, you know, whatever I needed to through grief. Right.
Kind of like you got so fake, you didn't even know what you were. Like, I don't know what my identity is anymore.
No, I didn't know. And when I asked God to show me, there was nothing there. Like nothing. So I just faked it. So, but it was easy for me to do the faking because that's what I'd always done. But then when I started to want to get into the grief portion of it, really work on the grief, then I couldn't because I was, overwhelmed with the trauma of the event for so many years. Went on a hike in Colorado with a group of 16 men that my brother-in-law had set up. Took my other son. And in that moment, in I think it was 2019 or 2020, right around COVID, I think it was 2020, but I remember walking those. We were backpacking Maroon Bells. It's a 31-mile hike. You do it over about 3 days. Anyways, walking down the hill, and it was the first moment that I was actually able to think about my son and love him and see his smile. And hear his laugh. Up to that point, whatever I would think about him, it had been just transported back either to the hospital or when I found him, and just all flooded with all that emotion. So that was the first moment that I could really actually grieve because I wasn't stuffing it anymore. And I'd learned to be vulnerable with another group of men. And share my story a little bit more. So that was a good start. But then I needed help through the grief journey because I'd shut it down so hard. So getting past the trauma first, then I had to go back into grief, like true grief, and work through that cycle. And unfortunately, I ended up just having done a lot of damage up to that point.
It sounds like you kind of had a lot of self-hatred for your past self before Gage died, and then Gage dies. And then, I don't know, when I lost Courtney and Riggins and Frankie and Race and Ryder, I was just kind of left with this question of why? Like, why? And you just can't help blame yourself at times and just completely hate yourself. And I know I've had some dark thoughts, and so I just wanted to ask you, like, have you ever had the thought of, like, I was such a terrible person, that's why Gage died?
Oh yeah, that's at first.
Yeah,
Right.
because I've had those thoughts too.
Those come quite frequently.
Yeah,
In the process. But I did a pretty good job of just stuffing it. Right. Doing what I'd always done.
and now you're just letting it all hang out now. Like, you'll talk about whatever, man.
Yeah.
It's very, you flip the script.
It's hard, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without discovering the power that men actually have for each other. I just don't think it's talked about enough.
Like when we open up and
The strength that men can show each other,
yeah,
the love. I mean, getting a hug from a man in complete vulnerability is probably one of the most beautiful things, most cherished things that I have experienced. Right? Allowing a man to hold me in just complete brokenness and just feeling their love has just really opened me up to the importance of what men really need. They need each other. We got to be willing to put ourselves out there.
How many people do you think you've helped by talking about your story?
I don't know. I don't know.
That's like a poorly worded question, but like I know it's a lot, and I think it's a two-way street. I've learned is when you're able to be vulnerable and open up, and it's like I need help. The minute you're able to do that, like you're able to help way more people. Like it opens up this two-way street now, and I think that's what makes it easy for, because I ask for help all the time. Like I admittedly, like I need help. I need help today. I need help tomorrow. But I think by asking for help, it's allowed me to help other people too.
Yeah.
And I think it would be harder for me to help other people if I never asked for help. I don't think the impact would be the same. I think somehow it's weirdly connected.
It's absolutely connected to our suffering. You have an empathy at a level that is really unmatched when it comes to trying to understand the pain of other men and other people. It's just so important for people to realize that they can be loved at their lowest moments, at their middle moments, their highest moments. Right.
No, I think that's why you mentioned being hugged by another guy when you're completely vulnerable is exactly that. Is you're showing them that you're completely broken, like this is who I am, and it's acceptable, and it's acceptable by other men, the people who I think are judging me and accusing me. I'm now being embraced by them. I'm sure that was a wonderful feeling.
Yeah. Well, in the journey of an event that we go through, the tragic events, I think, there are men who can hug you and, you can cry with in those those really moments. There's no shortage of hugs or that I got from my family and from friends and everything during those moments. The biggest one, though, the biggest moments is it's like 2 years down the road. It's 4 years down the road when you're just absolutely just clobbered by a memory or an event. I think that's when it's the most important to be able to have someone or someone's to be able to be vulnerable with. Because at that point, I think there's this expectation that men should be over it.
Right.
By that time. You should be moved on. You should be, strong. And, I had this expectation, I felt like, and this could have been my own perception in my marriage, that I had to be there for my wife because I was the only one that understood. And I couldn't. And I couldn't even admit that to anyone. I just couldn't do it. I just went into shame. You're right. I'm bad. I can't,
So you blame the divorce on you? Like it was...
Oh, absolutely. The catalyst to it all, I mean, would fall clearly on my shoulders, right? Not, it's a choice in the end by two people.
Right.
But, I can't deny the fact that my decisions led to the burden that I had put on my wife and my kids. So,
how many kids do you have?
Two kids.
I just want to ask, and we don't have to talk about it if you don't want to go there, but yeah, like the relationship with the ex-wife and the other kids through Gage's thing. Did the divorce happen because of Gage passing? Like you guys just couldn't see eye to eye, or with different reasons?
It was more of how I handled
stuff.
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about the kids losing Gage, and then you still have two other kids? How old were they?
My daughter was 8, I think around 8. And my son was, just starting his teen, like 12, I think. They're now, my son is actually on a mission in Brazil. He's 20. Oh, nice. My daughter's 16.
How are they doing?
Son's doing She's doing really well, doing real great. It was good for them to move back up here to Utah. My daughter is going through it's been really good friends up here. She's going through a little bit of a trial right now. She injured herself skiing. She fractured her back. So put her out of wrestling. And so it's been a real trial for her. And there was me fighting through some guilt because I was the one with her, right? When we went skiing together, right? It was my time with her and, she wanted to go skiing. So
the self-hatred just doesn't let up for you. And it's just one after another.
No, but I look on that event and as hard as I see it, I'm still so grateful that she's here. I still got to tell her. I love her every day. Where I don't have that opportunity with Gage anymore. I mean, I do, but it's not the same.
Losing a kid, like the best way I can explain it is you just want to die and you feel like you should, and that's what you deserve. And the pain feels like you are gonna die. Like, oh, I'm just gonna die, but then no, like you don't die. That's basically how I can explain it.
Well, the worst is I'm on a plane. Oh, can this plane just go down and I die? Can I be? You're driving in a car. What if I just jerked my car just a little bit and went off the bridge?
Would that kill me? Yeah, like
then I'm like, what if it didn't kill me? That would be awful.
Yeah, because I'm like, I can just totally just lean into this other lane, oncoming traffic, and be done. But then like, what would I do to them? Like, I'd probably kill them. And you just have all these weird thoughts, like just trying to die. Like, I just want to die. Yeah. And then like it's bad when you're Googling like suicide pods, like how to kill. You're like, I want to start my own suicide business and help old people just die if they're done. Like, just very dark. Like, oh, but it's on your brain. It's all you think about.
Just can't think about it.
I could just die doing this.
Like even today, if for some reason I drove away from here and got in a car accident and my life is over, I would actually be relieved.
Yeah,
I'd be like, okay, good.
Wow, I'm
on to the next step. Thank you.
This is. I feel like I'm at home. This is someone gets me. Yeah, like
there's, as much as life, as much as joy is brought to you in life, there's just as much pain on the other side too.
Yeah, I think the pain is worse than the joy, but yeah, I think we're willing to just put up with the pain for any amount of joy. But losing a kid is, how do I say this? Losing a kid is more impactful than having a kid, type of thing. Like the emotion of it. I don't know if that even makes sense, but
no, it makes sense.
It's not good.
So after it all happened, the people that I had the hardest time interacting with were actually adults because they don't know what to say.
Yeah,
they don't know how to act.
The kids, like, they'll be like, "Oh, Gage died," but at least like kids, like, yeah, he did. And or adults, you're right, they have no idea.
Well, they have kids, and they're imagining in their own heads what it would be like to actually lose their child, and they'll, and they say, "Well, I can't imagine." And I said, "You can." And how you imagine it is pretty close to what it would be like. It's hell. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you in any way. Like there's nothing that even compares to losing a child.
It's always there. It doesn't, like, it comes in waves, but also like no, like it's always just. I think I explained it one time as like there's just a fire alarm going off in my head, really loud, and no one else can hear it. And then you just try to have conversations and go to work throughout the day, and no one else hears this thing. And it's just, that's the best way I can explain it. Like, so I have to create a podcast to talk about this fire alarm. Like, is anyone else hearing this? Like, because it's there, man.
Absolutely,
and it haunts you. You
so
you should have done this. You could have done this. You should have done this, and then you're not living your current life. It's just robbing you of the day you have now. So not only is the grief taking what you love, but now it's taking your day to day, and you're just living in this denial of dream state of what life should have been. And I forget what you said earlier, but I had the same thing with Blue. I couldn't show up for Blue anymore. I just couldn't, like, and I think when I realized that, that's when I started to have a desire to, like, okay, like, I need to talk about this or lean into this, or I have to do something because I can't even be a father to Blue anymore. And I think that was a turning point for me. Yeah.
It's you do have to latch on to something that turns you, right? And for me, you know, at that point, my, you know, using my family as a motivation to turn things around wasn't enough, right? I had to lose them to get to a place where I would be motivated to do what was necessary for myself.
Yeah.
And luckily, you know, I was introduced to just great men in my life.
What men groups are you a part of? Are they?
So I did it's called Rising Suns. There's a couple of local therapists here that put it on, Brandon and Tyler Patrick.
Is it specifically people who've lost children or loved ones, or is it just
No,
anyone?
it's just a
Okay.
men's group, and it's associated with a lot of, you know, pornography and acting out in that way. But there's also
No,
alcohol.
I
and
speak
everything,
at a
so-
lot of men's group things, and no, I think they're great.
Yeah, so that's, you know, I went to that in 22, and they put you through some pretty deep stuff. So they take you. The impactful events for me was you go on the beach. We're in Bear Lake, right? It's around September, and you're on the beach, and they have microphone. We have speakers set up, and a stage, and you have to stand on the stage and actually verbalize your shame to everybody out loud.
This is this sounds like
So
shame.
not just shame, but
Shame.
what is it that you are using that you are shameful for? Like, what is it that you're driving? In that moment, I had to admit that I was using my son's death to justify everything that I was doing.
Wow.
And I was so embarrassed to say it. That all of the decisions, all of the acting out, all of the things that I'd done up to that point, I said to myself, no one would ever judge me because they haven't experienced what I've experienced. And I realized at that moment, I'm using my son's death to be a dickhead and to make these decisions. And that was probably the biggest shame that I had to come to release. Like, I need to put this out there. I need people to hear because I would act out or do whatever. And I say, well, no one will judge me because they don't know my pain.
Such a wow way to talk about it, because the ego is real, and I try to mention the ego and grief. It's real, and you do get into those headspaces, and it's the ultimate trump card. Like, who's gonna tell you anything? You lost a
gonna judge
kid,
me?
like, yeah, and that's what I had too, and that's why I was so close to just being an alcoholic in my bed till I died. Like, because everyone kind of like, yeah, like that's probably what I would do. Like, they just, yeah, like no accountability anymore.
Right.
And if it wasn't for Blue, I don't know if I would have ever come out of that. And I talk about, I like to use the example of the movie Castaway. When Tom Hanks is leaving the island, that saved him, but he has to leave it, right, to get back to his real life. And I feel like that's grief, is when he was so sad to leave that island. And I think part of people's grief is they're scared to leave, like, the pity party and the poor you. And they just want people to feel bad for him forever, and they just play the trump card. Like, you don't know what it's like to lose a kid. You don't know what it's like to lose a spouse and a brother. And if you're not careful, you can just play that card till your death.
I was doing it almost
Yeah.
daily. And you see people, I mean, still those who, you know, whatever experiences they're using to justify, however they're starting to
Well,
numb
that's the
themselves.
fucked up thing, is it's a really good card. It is a
So,
trump card.
of
Like,
course it is.
What, like, yeah.
It's
That's
it's
the one-
amazing to
Yeah,
be able to say,
like,
fuck you,
Yeah.
get out of my face. I
Right.
can be this way because I've got this.
Right.
Instead of actually stepping away and saying, I'm embarrassed that me personally, I was embarrassed that I used my son's death to make some choices.
Was
that I was
it, do you think it was like the literal men's group and other men going up there and just speaking out loud what they're shameful of? Was that really what helped you?
Some of the things. So we were in a circle, and it started out kind of vanilla, like, oh, I'm this, and I look at that, and I do this. A couple of men got up and really, really put out some very vulnerable stories about what they were really ashamed of that had happened in their lives. And when I heard those ones, I immediately knew that because by that point I was just like, oh yeah, I'll do the same thing. Like, yeah, I look at porn from time to time. I touch myself, whatever, blah blah blah. But no, when those guys were vulnerable and they put out some pretty heavy things, I knew at that moment that I had to really dig deeper to really say, what am I ashamed of really that I've been doing? And you do that. So then once you put it out there, once I was able to put it out there, you just get big hugs from guys and men afterwards, and just that they love you. And
I mean, when you heard someone say something and then you felt like, oh, I can say my thing. I mean, imagine the domino effect you had. Like, once you said your thing, I'm sure there's a bunch of guys like, holy shit. Like, there's probably some guys like, I don't even need to say my thing anymore. Like, good God. Like, at least I think that's we is greater than me, man. That's like I love that. I think it's so important to find a group like that of support.
And so that's the first day where we focus all on pain. What is our pain? What are our pain? They take us through all kinds of stuff. And that night we spelunk down into a cave, and we sit in a cave in the dark, and they go through a little session there. I was actually, by the time we got to that point in the night, I was so filled with so much peace. All my anger had been released. Everything there was people, guys that were going through some other stuff during this cave experience, but I just was like, because I had released that burden in that moment. So the same day I go through the shame, and that moment, all I'm doing is just praying for and wishing love for these men who are still suffering. I just wanted them to feel loved. Like, I could hear their pain. I could feel their pain around me. And I just want you guys to be loved. And then
you just didn't want them to feel like you.
No.
Like, what it feels like, and you're like, I don't want anyone to feel like that.
Release yourself of this burden. And then the end of the series is 3 days. You go up and watch the sunrise, kind of silently, and that's when I knew at that point. Was told, you will be saved through men, and you will save men. Right. That's how God said He was going to continue to speak to me, and to this day, that's what's happened. I've been introduced to all kinds of different groups, and men asking for support in certain, aspects of their life, and I'm happy to give it freely without any expectation whatsoever.
When someone loses a child, what are some things you tell them, or do you just go give them a hug, or what do you do?
No, I just tell them they're loved. Just say,
just show up.
I'm just here.
Yeah, that's what
you can behave. You can feel whatever you need to. All of it's okay.
Yeah, I just remember after the accident, I just have friends come over and we'd just watch a movie or two or just some basketball games. And we wouldn't say anything. But it was just so nice that they were there. Like, they were just there on the
being
couch.
treated as normal.
Yeah, for 5 hours, they just sat there.
Because everybody would look at you like,
yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're just this.
So I think just showing up really just does a lot.
Yeah, the teenagers in that were my son's friends that were a part of that, they really saved us just as a whole, as a family. Which is the reason that, really my ex started the foundation, the compassion clubs on top of it.
Yeah, I think this is a
So,
good moment. I usually start with the obituary, but we just got right into it, which is great. But can I read the obituary now, just so we
Of
can
course.
hear a little bit more about Gage, and then maybe get into more of your 90%, and then yeah. Okay, Gage Schroeder, June 14th, 2002 to May 18th, 2017. Gage Schroeder, son of Adam and Brittany Schroeder, returned to his heavenly father and his sister, Taylor, on May 18th, 2017 in El Paso, Texas. Gage was born on June 14th, 2002 in Salt Lake City, Utah. Gage was a wonderful son, big brother, and role model to many. He excelled in academics, wrestling, and was an entrepreneur from a very young age. Gage made everyone laugh with his quick wit and outgoing personality. Teenagers with a quick wit, they can be stubborn sometimes. Gage had many interests and hobbies, but his favorite thing was spending time socializing with friends and strangers. Gage was survived by his parents, Adam and Brittany, brother Talon, sister Presley, grandparents Don and Mary Schroeder. And then, can I read this article about him?
Of course, it was a good
It's
friend of ours that wrote it.
It's very, this is from the publisher. This was written August 21st, 2017. I just really like the article. I think it's great. So I'm just going to read it real quick. I think the world has gone crazy. That's what my husband said last night. It feels like violent, hateful events are erupting everywhere. It leaves me overwhelmed. As I digest crazy story after crazy story and try to make sense of it, there is one word that keeps coming back. Compassion. The word has been top of my mind all summer, and a 14-year-old El Paso boy's legacy is responsible. Gage Schroeder died on May 18th from an accident with a firearm. His death is an absolute tragedy, but his mark on this world lives on. Just shy of his 15th birthday, Gage had more impact on the people he met than many of us have had over our lifetimes. Gage was funny, smart, and already a savvy entrepreneur with a remarkable work ethic. I was so impressed by Gage that we did a story for El Paso Kids, Inc. on his summer business cleaning trash cans. In fact, he inspired my own kids to pick up an El Paso Inc. newspaper route. Gage was full of life with startling emotional intelligence. He was unusually intuitive and had genuine concern for others. His parents, Adam and Brittany Schroeder, are committed to promoting Gage's legacy of kindness and compassion. Over the summer, they established the Gage Schroeder Compassion Foundation and intend on supporting young people who are engaged in offering their compassion, service, and intellect to communities and individuals in need. This week, Brittany announced that she is working with EPISD. I don't know if there's
The El Paso School District,
Okay.
Independent School District.
Thank you. Staff and principals to implement compassion clubs at schools. This is so cool. Now, more than ever, a message about compassion is especially relevant and needed. In Psychology Today magazine, I love this part. Psychologist Lisa Firestone says emotional intelligence is one of the most important things we can teach our children. She points out that we drill them with math, reading, brushing their teeth, and yet we fail to equip them with an emotional education that can dramatically improve the quality of their lives. Over the past few years, the topic of a high emotional intelligence, or EQ, has gained a lot of momentum. Studies show higher probabilities of success for people with high EQs. A story in Fast Company from 2015 talks about why emotionally intelligent people are more successful, even over IQ and experience. It turns out that people skills are crucial. I don't want to oversimplify the complexities of today's current events, but a little more compassion could go a long way. Thank you, Gage, for teaching me. Very beautiful article. Can you talk about the trash cans a little bit? That's just so cool, and it's a really good idea. And now, like I see like legit trucks that are built to like clean out these garbage cans now.
Yeah. So at the time, I had read a book, The Power of Habit was the book. And in there, they told a story about how Febreze came about. And so when we were thinking about businesses for Gage, I was like, why don't you just clean garbage cans? You know, have a power washer. We've got a 4-wheeler. We've got a trailer. You know, or I can get a trailer and just drive around and sign people up and bring it back to our house. You spray out the garbage cans. But our little twist on it was before you return them, and this is where the Febreze story comes into play, right? They did a study where they used to do the commercials where you go into a stinky house, right? And you spray the Febreze and people walk in and they're like, oh, I don't smell anything. But who wants to admit that they have a stinky house?
Right.
So they changed to commercials where they would show a woman or a wife spraying the room after it was totally clean. Like, it looks great, immaculate. Let's just add this last little piece, the smell, right? So that's where I was like, when you're done, take this scent spray, spray it inside the garbage can, seal it with a sticker they called the Can Man, so that the first time they open it, they get a whiff of this freshness when they see a clean garbage can. So it's kind of how the concept came for the whole business. But he took the opportunity. He would sign people up and he would clean a lot. And some of his friends would come over and help, and he would pay them. And but after he passed away, we actually had people coming down that he serviced us and just said, I had a conversation with him in my front yard.
No way.
Just about, and he just asked about how I was.
Yeah, and the obituary said he loved talking with friends and strangers. I'm like, I wonder what that meant, but yeah, like
so that was the biggest thing, that after he passed, we received letters and texts. I didn't, mainly my wife, my ex did at that time. Emails, people just telling stories about an interaction that they had with Gage.
That's one of my favorite things when people tell me stories about them. I love that.
Kids writing letters saying, I was suicidal that day. I was going to take my life. And I had a conversation with Gage and I decided not to. Letters like that, just, he saved me. He just saw people's pain and could just match, his compassion with it and care for that person and love. Is probably just one of the most amazing things about who he was. And we didn't really see the extent until after he had passed away.
That's usually how it works. I mean, that's how. Same thing with Courtney. I mean, the viewing and the funeral, I had so many of people I've never met, like coworkers and friends, and I loved hearing these stories of Courtney. And yeah, that's great.
So we wanted to, start something that was impactful enough, and we felt like because of the compassion that was shown to us by other teenagers during our hardest time, we wanted that message to be brought all the time. So, started compassion clubs in schools.
So cool.
There's some in El Paso. There's, they're all over. Curriculum was created, by my ex-wife, and she's, that's her thing that she's been able to do to keep her, where she needs to be. And I was happy to be a part of it, loved being a part of it. But unfortunately, I used it as another fake me, right? Show up, be strong, be in front, be present in front of people, help out, be helpful, right? I still allowed it to keep me from actually fully experiencing what I needed to experience. So, but as a part of that, we also started a wrestling tournament at his high school, the Gage Memorial, we call it.
So cool.
Been doing it for 8 years. And at that tournament, it's local El Paso, and some kids from southern New Mexico, and we'll get kids from brought some kids down from Utah a couple times. But at that tournament, we don't give MVP awards or outstanding wrestler or anything like that. We give courage awards to the kids, and it's specifically asking coaches to nominate kids who have suffered, been through suffering, and are still compassionate, still show up every day, right? So the stories that we've been told about kids losing parents and suffering, but are still showing up, working hard every day, and loving other kids has been amazing. As well as coaches, we give a Compassionate Coaches Award every year. We let the kids tell us about their coaches and how wonderful and impactful they are. So that's the whole purpose of the tournament. Yes, it's wrestling. It's great. And I love wrestling. Been doing it most of my life. But to see the impact that we make by giving out a courage award, and it's usually not the best wrestler at all,
That's cool.
So that's kind of what we've been, doing for a while. And, I'm less involved, but it's still an important part of, helping me carry on my legacy and my connection to Gage, especially the wrestling tournament.
He passed away how many years?
8 years ago.
8 years ago.
In May. It's 2017.
So, looking back 8 years now, how would you explain your grief journey from then to now? And how would you explain, how do I say it, your self-worth, maybe?
I've thought about this a lot, and I go back to my journey was probably delayed. My grief journey delayed a bit by a couple things. Who I had decided to be before that event, how I decided to manage myself before, not truly showing who I truly was, to after that event, the trauma, just, and not knowing how to deal with that, and not seeking proper sources to be able to actually deal with trauma specifically, really kept my journey from really progressing where it needed to go in order for me to get to a self-compassionate and loving place for myself.
Okay.
Right? Just delayed a good 5 years. So, but finally stepping into a place where I'm okay looking like I'm a mess. It's okay. I'm not perfect. I've had to admit all kinds of things since then. And and I'm okay. Right? When Gage passed, I was working for a company and they let me go 6 months later after he had passed away. I didn't even take 2 weeks off from work, which was a disaster. I didn't know. Again, for me, it was like, I got to show up. People have to see me as strong and whatever. And it was a mess all the time. To where this last year, moving up here, I actually had to tell my boss, look, going through a divorce, it's awful, right? I'm not showing up every day. This isn't fair to who you are. Need to get back to Utah. I just need you to know I haven't been showing up every day like I should. But you know what? I'm okay with that. Right? So, it felt good to be truthful and honest at that point. And we were able to work things out. And, I got a different job and moved up here with a different company and everything. But it just feels good to be more open and honest about where I'm at and not have to just pretend anymore with people. That includes my relationship with the church and everything. It's way different than I had ever imagined it was going to be. So, I guess my journey is learning if there's something in your life now that is keeping you from finding out your true self, or you're stuffing your true self, like work to figure that out and work past it, because an event will happen in your life, and if you're in a place where you're not ready for it, I mean, it will mess with you. It will hurt you.
Yeah, I think I think my advice, what you're saying, is you got to look it in the face and can't run away from it because it's not going anywhere.
Nope. Nope. You know, being able to just say, this is who I am, is probably the most beautiful thing you can do for yourself, regardless of where you're at.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I'm trying to do is just love myself in this situation. And it's hard. It's just really hard, but trying to be compassionate with myself and just give myself a break sometimes. Because that negative self-talk can just be relentless sometimes.
Absolutely.
And the waves of, like, when you're in, the waves come and you're in, like, the deepest circle of it, it's not good.
Absolutely not.
I think crying alone when you're in that moment, that's one of the worst feelings. Like, oh,
So many car rides.
you almost feel
so
bad.
many music songs that would come
Sometimes
on
I'm
that
like,
just destroy you.
yeah, sometimes I'm telling myself, like, I'm so sorry, Mason. Like, that this is your life, man. Like, I'm like telling myself. It's like, yeah, those moments are hard, man, but I do think grief is similar to other things in life. Like, it takes practice and effort and reps, and I've been through a lot of those reps and been able to manage it a little better, but the pain is very much still there, maybe even worse. But
The biggest thing I've learned from grief is you just give yourself permission to be a mess.
Yeah,
And
just
be
cry.
okay.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm a mess. And you know what? My phrase that I learned from this men group that we say, even to this day, I'm a badass motherfucker. And there's nothing that you can take from me.
Yeah.
And I just look at myself very differently. And that doesn't mean I still don't have moments of, shame from time to time. I mean, with my daughter's accident just recently, it was over Christmas. I plunged hard after that event because I was steeped with so much shame because she was with me, and now she can't wrestle and just all kinds of things. But I just, having the group of men that I could voice that shame to out loud and feel the love back. You're a good guy. You're a good man. You're a good father. Really helped me realize, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I
And
am.
just
I'm doing my very best.
The feeling that you're not alone, like you're with other people that are like, yeah, like me too over here, and like, oh wow, like okay, like yeah, like the loneliness. I think the men's group definitely helps with that.
Men, I think, suffer mostly from the self-punishment.
Yeah. I have a couple pornography questions. Are you cool with that?
Yeah.
What helped you break that cycle?
So just accepting who I was, really, and that I'm not this terrible person, right?
Like loving your, like just,
Correct.
Yeah, like more self-love.
Right. And setting aside expectations that I have to look a certain way in order to, I think men, especially here, specifically in Utah, put a lot of pressure on themselves to look a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, one, and it's unnecessary, two. So be able to shed that fact that I have to look, like I'm good, I'm going to church, I'm doing this stuff, I'm doing this or going here or being seen doing this or doing that, just to add so much unnecessary pressure to someone. So for me, it's just accepting that that I'm loved either way. I mean, I've been involved in a relationship since my divorce, and she's been amazing to show me that I can be loved and I don't have to be looking a certain way.
Yeah.
Right? That's really just been the biggest thing. It's not that I've implemented filters and accountability partners and all of these
Sunshine
things.
on my face for 10 minutes, and then I hit the gym, cold plunge, and then I read 15 minutes of the book. It's not even 6 a.m. yet. The whole thing. Yeah.
Correct. Like, yes, you do set up healthy activity for yourself that keeps you having a positive image of who you are. Meditation. When I feel overwhelmed by any particular situation, I'll go into, it's even a 30-second meditation for me where I just speak, to myself in a certain way that's positive, right? So, I don't know, shedding these expectations that I have to be a certain way has probably been the biggest for me.
That's great.
And that's just where, so I would say most men deal with having to live and look a certain way, and that's the biggest pressure that they deal with, and they haven't learned how to accept the fact that they're probably just going to mess up. And guess what? It's okay.
Yeah.
It's perfectly okay. Who cares what another person thinks about you?
Can't control that.
So for me, that's what it had to be. It was really self-compassion, self-love. That's why internal family system work was really important for me.
So you used internal family systems for pornography too?
Oh yeah.
Wow. I do. I just want to. I don't think porn's good. Like, studies are there. Like, it's bad for your brain and all the things, and the types of porn is not good. But I do have to say, like, being in Utah, like, I think some men struggle with porn addiction, and it's not even a porn addiction. Like, dude, you look at porn once a month, and you're doing fine, or once a week. Like, I think these false expectations that you talked about is real.
Oh yeah.
Especially in Utah, yeah, you got to get out of your bedroom. You can't be doing this all day. But I don't know,
if it was once a month,
right?
Once every 6 months, it's not in it.
So I think
it's
that's
not
a
even classified.
too.
Shouldn't even be classified
Right.
as an addiction, right? It's an unwanted behavior, right? It may bring unwanted consequences from time to time, but I just, for me, I was pretending like it was every 6 months with everybody around me when it was like,
what do you
3 times a
6
week.
months? Yeah, I just do
Right.
every 6 months.
when I was like 3 weeks or
But
sometimes it was every 3 days. It was crazy.
I do think that's because you have these high expectations and the shame and guilt comes along with it. I don't know if there's people listening, you have to take it easy on yourself a little bit, I think. But
have love for yourself. It's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. And it's just easy for pornography to be hidden. You don't wear it on your body. You don't.
Yeah,
you don't see anything. You don't stumble around.
It's a perfect
like you're an
example
idiot.
of we don't talk. It's a topic that we don't talk about, and it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Which is unfortunate because it's a natural part of who we all
It's so
are.
because then we don't tell our kids about it. So then our teenage kids are just looking at porn, and then they're just going through issues like, "How come I don't look like that?" It's like, well, no one actually looks like that, and it's just, and then we don't talk about it.
When I was a teenager, there was no electronic access, right?
Yeah.
It was like looking at the JCPenney magazine for our day.
Yeah, I remember going to Vegas. You had to pick up the pictures off the ground.
Correct.
Yeah.
Nowadays, the kids and the access they have, my gosh.
Yeah. Hey, Siri, show me some boobies.
And those that have access, every one of them. I would doubt there's any kid and that hasn't seen it. And we're actually seeing a rise in the amount of girls who are getting heavily involved in it now too. Yeah. This isn't just a boy problem, right?
Yeah.
The percentage for girls is going way up. And I think there's even more shame in that area that's put on girls, right?
So they're not talking about it.
No, absolutely not.
No one's talking about it.
No, which is unfortunate because our sexuality is 100%
Everyone
what God
loves
gave
sex.
us. We're
all doing it. We're all thinking about it. But you don't talk about it ever.
God
6
created
months?
us.
We do it 6 months. What are you doing?
They created us to be sexual beings. It's a great way to connect with one another. Obviously, it can be misused.
It's literally just like everything else. It's literally like alcohol. It's literally or work or video games or whatever. There reaches a balance point, a tipping point that you can't do it that much. Now it's hurting your day-to-day life, and it's not good.
Right. it can be hard with behavioral addictions like pornography or sex or food, stuff like that, because you have to have those things in order to feel, especially food. You
Food's
have
another
to
one
eat to
not talked
survive,
about, yeah.
right? So, what you have to learn is a proper relationship with sex or a proper relationship with food in order to have it be a benefit for your life, right? Because you can't do without it.
And you're right. The sex thing, it's so easy to hide. Like,
It's too
you
easy.
can't really, yeah.
Well, the amount of, obviously with the church and everything, there's a lot of pressure. It's still this focus that pornography is the problem. Pornography is not the problem. Pornography is the solution people choose because of the problems that they're facing.
Yeah.
The shame, the
It's a
the
coping
depression, the whatever that they're experiencing, the traumas, the wounds, that their family of origin wounds, whatever, being rejected, all of that stuff. That's why internal family systems, I think, is probably one of the most important things you can do for yourself as a man
I love that.
to overcome pornography as being your choice behavior to manage yourself, right? Because that's all you're doing. You just want to feel okay,
Yeah.
right? So, but the message is, that's the problem, and if you don't stop it, it will ruin everything in your life, which is true.
And especially,
I'm an example of that.
well, that, and you're in this religion, in this society where perfection, people are just pretending that they're perfect. So you just feel like you're really messing up, when in reality, everyone
You're just
is
like
the
everybody
bishop,
else.
even that you're going to
Yeah.
for help. He's looking at it too. Like, we're like, yeah.
Absolutely. So if we could just be more honest with each other and not put so much shame around
Yeah, like when you tell
the
the bishop,
uncomfortableness around
the bishop should be like, "Oh, what are your favorite sites? Like, what do you?" Just find some common ground before, like, "Oh yeah." Nah. Anything else you want to talk about before we get to movies? I don't know if we want to end on a porn topic. Well, that's just kind of how it happened.
That's right. I think it's important. The main message that I wanted to get across today was men don't have to suffer alone. And I will put it out there. I can share my number with you. If anybody wanted to reach out to me after, I'll take the phone call, right? I'll go sit down and have lunch with them, whatever, right? They need to talk. They just need someone. It's fine. I'll say that because I've done it, right? I listened to a podcast and someone on the podcast said, I don't have anybody. I got his number. I reached out to him, and we're still in contact to today.
Oh.
Right? I'm okay doing that because I know it's needed. So the message for me is start creating good, healthy relationships with other men. And that's just not be idiots with each other, which is important to do that, to have your good friends where you can be crazy and do crazy things and support each other in that way. But men, then you can really be vulnerable. You can cry on their shoulder, no matter what it is. Whether it's I messed up, or it's just I'm disappointed in, what decision I made at work or whatever. To the other message is just if you recognize there's something that you're doing in your life now and you haven't necessarily gone through anything super intense, we all go through our stuff. My suggestion would be recognize that and work on it, right?
Yeah, you're very self-aware, and the honesty and vulnerability you showed today was a lot of strength and courage. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that.
I think it's a really good example.
Well,
Really
I was always been impressed with what you've done for yourself
Well, thank
and
you.
how you're, going about doing your best to just be a great man that you are. So that's how I look at you.
Well, thanks, man.
It's just a great guy who loves the people around him and doesn't want to see suffering.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Of course.
You a movie guy?
Of course. I love movies.
Top 3. We go 3, 2, 1. So you announce your favorite movie at the end.
For me, Shawshank Redemption has always been a good one.
Yeah. You got to
do.
get busy living or dying.
I don't know if I know they've done movies of this, but Les Miserables has always been a good one for me.
Which one?
Les Miserables.
I haven't seen this one.
Les Mis.
Les Mis?
So Hugh Jackman did the.
Oh,
they
I've
did
heard of
the.
yeah, okay, I know.
But it's a Broadway show.
yeah, I know what this is now.
So actually going to the Broadway show in March here in Utah.
There you go.
So it's the storyline is one of my favorites. It's one of redemption and suffering and all this, integrity and.
I just wasn't
impeccability
expecting
and all
this
that
after
kind of stuff.
Shawshank. The Shawshank was really gritty.
Yeah, yeah. And then I don't know. My third, I guess I just go back to my childhood. The first time I went to the movie theater, I saw Return of the Jedi. Like the feeling I had watching that show as a child was just amazing. So it's always a favorite of mine.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
But I love movies. I love messages. I could go all day with different series that I like and things. But I'd say those are probably the ones that have been impactful for me.
What about Gage? Did he have any movies he really loved?
Gosh, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
8 years ago, so he's
Goonies.
Probably...
He loved Goonies.
Goonies was classic.
He loved Goonies. Yeah.
When Chunk is just confessing everything.
Yeah.
And then this one time, I stole it.
And then I leaned over and I threw up on everybody. And then the worst part was that you just heard this sound. And everybody started throwing up on everybody else.
I gotta watch the Goonies again.
Yeah, Goonies is always a good one. And then Sandlot. So my kids, Gage loves Sandlot, and
That wimpy deer. That's part of the movie. That was a movie quote.
yeah. Sandlot was filmed here.
Yeah.
And they opened a restaurant
right.
called the Bambino
I didn't
that you
know
can
that.
go to. Yeah.
Did you know they opened up the Bambino? Hey, did you know I went on Squintz's podcast?
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
2 years ago.
Oh, sweet.
Me and Ryan went. He makes his own weed. Great guy, or grows it. Anyway, we're just rambling now. We better end this thing. Life's 10% what happens to you, and 90% what you're gonna do about it.